In the dim glow of a Los Angeles diner, a trembling waitress leaned closer to the man in the corner booth, his suit immaculate, his aura dangerous. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Please, help me. He keeps following me." The man set down his glass, eyes cold but sharp as a blade. Outside, rain streaked down neon reflections, and in that instant, the Mafia boss, feared by enemies across the city, stood up for the first time, not to collect a debt, but to protect a stranger. What he did next would silence every rumor about his heart. The neon sign outside Rosie's diner flickered R, then O, then the whole thing. Emma Hartley had stopped noticing it 3 months ago. Around the same time, she'd stopped caring whether the coffee she poured was fresh or 6 hours old. The graveyard shift paid an extra $1.50 an hour. That was all that mattered. She wiped down the counter for the third time that hour. 11:40 on a Tuesday night. The kind of night when Los Angeles showed its true face, not the one on postcards, but the one that lived in alleys and 24-hour diners where questions weren't asked. The bell above the door chimed. Emma looked up. The man who walked in wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car. Dark hair, graying at the temples, mid-40s maybe. He moved like someone who'd never had to ask permission for anything in his life. He chose the corner booth. Always the corner booth with men like him. Emma grabbed a menu and walked over, her sneakers squeaking on linoleum that had seen better decades. Up close, she noticed his eyes dark, calculating, the kind that saw everything and forgot nothing. "Coffee?" she asked. "Black." His voice was quiet but carried weight. "And whatever's hot." She nodded and turned away. As she poured the coffee, her hands shook slightly. Not because of him, though men in expensive suits in this neighborhood usually meant trouble, but because of the other one. The man in the gray hoodie across the street. He'd been there for 3 weeks now. Different times, different days, but always watching. Always waiting. Emma set the coffee down in front of the suit. Meatloaf's fresh. Well, relatively fresh. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. That'll do. She wrote it down, though there was no one else in the diner and she'd remember anyway. Old habits. When she glanced toward the window, the hoodie was still there, face obscured by shadow and the glow of a cigarette. Her hand tightened on her pen. The man in the booth noticed. He noticed everything. "You all right?" he asked. "Fine," Emma said too quickly. Long shift. She retreated to the kitchen, slid the order through to Bobby, the night cook who spent most of his time reading conspiracy websites between orders. When she came back out, the man in the booth had shifted position. He could now see both the door and the window. Professional. Emma's instincts, honed by 2 years of running from her past, whispered that this man was dangerous, but there were different kinds of dangerous. Some men were dangerous like fire, unpredictable, consuming everything. Others were dangerous like steel, cold, controlled, purposeful. This man was steel. She refilled his coffee without being asked. His eyes tracked her movements, then shifted to the window, to the gray hoodie. "How long has he been following you?" the man asked quietly. Emma's breath caught. "I don't. 3 nights ago he was here. 2 nights before that. Different hoodie, same stance, same way of watching." He took a sip of coffee. "So, how long?" Emma set the pot down. Her legs felt weak. For 3 weeks, she'd told herself she was paranoid, that after everything with Derek, she was seeing threats where there were none. But this stranger, this dangerous stranger, confirmed it was real. 3 weeks, she whispered. The man nodded slowly. "You call the police?" She almost laughed. "And tell them what? A guy stands on a public street?" "Fair point." He looked at her then, really looked, and Emma felt like he was reading her entire history. The bruises she'd covered with makeup 2 years ago. The restraining order that had been worth less than the paper it was printed on. The 3 a.m. drive to a new city with everything she owned in 2 garbage bags. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Emma. Marco DeLuca." He offered his hand across the table. Emma recognized the name. Anyone who'd lived in Los Angeles for more than a month knew it. Marco DeLuca, alleged organized crime figure, owner of half the businesses in downtown, the man who made problems disappear. Her hand trembled as she shook his. "I'd tell you not to worry," Marco said, releasing her hand. "But I don't insult people's intelligence. You have good reason to worry. But not tonight." "Why not tonight?" He finished his coffee. "Because I'm here." The meatloaf arrived. Marco ate slowly, methodically, the way people eat when food is fuel, not pleasure. Emma tried to busy herself with closing tasks, refilling ketchup bottles, rolling silverware and paper napkins, but her eyes kept drifting to the window. The gray hoodie had moved. Closer now. Just outside the laundromat next door. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. She dropped a fork. It clattered on the floor, loud in the empty diner. Bobby stuck his head through the kitchen window. "You good?" "Fine," she lied. Marco pushed his empty plate aside and looked at his watch, a simple steel piece. Nothing flashy. Emma noticed his knuckles were scarred. Old scars, the kind that came from connecting with bone and teeth. The bell above the door chimed. Emma's whole body went rigid. But it was just Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman from 2 blocks over who came in for pie and hot water every Tuesday. Emma exhaled and took her order, but her voice came out thin and strained. When she turned back, the gray hoodie was at the window, not trying to hide anymore. Just standing there, face still shadowed, watching. Emma froze. Marco's eyes flicked to the window, then back to Emma. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. He became somehow more present, more dangerous. Emma walked over to his booth on legs that didn't feel like her own. She leaned down, close enough to smell his cologne cedar and something darker. "Please," she whispered, the word barely audible. "Help me. He keeps following me." For a long moment, Marco said nothing. He just looked at her with those dark, calculating eyes. Then he reached into his jacket. Emma flinched involuntarily and pulled out a phone. He typed something. Put the phone away. "What time do you get off?" he asked quietly. 2. "You have a car?" "Yes." "Good. When you leave, drive normally. Don't rush. Don't look around. There'll be a black Escalade 2 cars behind you. Follow its signals. It'll guide you somewhere safe." Emma's throat tightened. "I can't afford. You're not paying anything." He pulled out his wallet, left 2 20s on the table for a $12 meal. "And Emma? Whatever happens, don't go home tonight. But my things, not worth your life." He stood up. The gray hoodie outside shifted, suddenly alert. Marco walked to the door, calm and unhurried, and stepped into the night. Emma watched through the window, her heart in her throat. Marco walked directly toward the gray hoodie. The man tried to turn away, but Marco was faster. He didn't grab him, didn't threaten, just spoke quietly, too low for Emma to hear. The conversation lasted maybe 30 seconds. When Marco stepped back, the gray hoodie was gone, just vanished into the shadows like he'd never existed. Marco walked to a dark sedan parked half a block down, got in, and drove away. Emma realized she'd been holding her breath. Mrs. Chen called for her check. Emma brought it over, her hand still shaking. "You all right, dear?" the old woman asked. "Yes," Emma said. And for the first time in 3 weeks, she almost believed it. Marco sat in the back room of Genovese's, a restaurant he'd owned for 15 years but had never once eaten in. The office was small, windowless, secure. His second in command, Vincent Russo, stood by the door. "Tell me about the hoodie," Marco said. Vincent consulted his phone. "Name's Tyler Brennan, 37. Former LAPD, fired 6 years ago for excessive force. Since then, he's been freelance surveillance mostly, sometimes muscle. Works for whoever pays. Who's paying now? Still tracking that. But he's been watching the diner for 3 weeks. Not just the girl, you too, boss. Last 2 times you were there, he took photos." Marco's jaw tightened. He'd been going to Rosie's diner for 4 months, always late night, always when he needed to think away from the noise of his normal world. It was a place where no one knew him, where he could be invisible for an hour. Apparently he'd been wrong about that. "He's the only one?" Marco asked. "As far as we can tell. But if someone's watching you through him, they know your patterns. They know you go there. They might know why." Marco stood and walked to the small mirror on the wall. He saw what he always saw. A man in his mid-40s who'd spent half his life building an empire through careful calculation and controlled violence. His father had taught him early. Show no weakness, trust no one, and never let emotion interfere with business. But tonight, when that girl had whispered her plea, something had shifted. "What do you want to do?" Vincent asked. Marco turned. "Find out who hired Brennan. And Vincent, be thorough." Vincent nodded and left. Marco sat back down and pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts until he found Detective Rachel Moreno, one of the few cops in the city who would take his call. "DeLuca," she answered. "It's late. I need a favor." "Of course you do." "A woman. Emma Hartley." Works at Rosie's Diner on 6th. Someone's been stalking her, Tyler Brennan, former cop. I need to know if she has priors, outstanding warrants, anything that would make her a target. There was a pause. Why do you care? Humor me. Another pause. Then the sound of typing. Emma Louise Hartley, 28. No priors, no warrants. Clean as they come. 2 years ago, she filed a restraining order against a Derek Chambers in Phoenix, domestic violence case. He did 6 months, got out on good behavior. Current location of Chambers? More typing. Los Angeles. Paroled to an address in Van Nuys 3 months ago. Marco's hand tightened on the phone. Send me everything you have on Chambers. Marco. Send it, Rachel. He hung up. 30 seconds later, his phone pinged with a file. He opened it and saw the face of Derek Chambers' 31 muscular, cold eyes. The restraining order details made Marco's jaw clench. Broken ribs, concussion, cigarette burns on her forearms. Marco had seen a lot of evil in his life, had committed some of it himself, but he'd always had rules. You didn't hurt women. You didn't hurt children. You didn't prey on the weak. Derek Chambers had broken all of those rules. His phone buzzed. Vincent. Boss, we found something. Brennan's phone records show daily calls to a burner phone. That burner has been pinging off towers near the Van Nuys address you were just asking about. Chambers, Marco said quietly. You know him? Now I do. Marco stood up. I want eyes on Chambers tonight, and I want Brennan brought in. Not hurt, just brought in. I need to ask him some questions. Understood. Marco ended the call and looked at his watch. 1:30 in the morning. Emma would be getting off work in 30 minutes. He'd told his driver to follow her, make sure she got somewhere safe. But Marco had a feeling that wouldn't be enough. Not if Derek Chambers was the one pulling the strings. Men like Chambers didn't give up. They didn't let go. They saw women as property, and they'd burn the world down rather than lose what they thought belonged to them. Marco knew the type. He'd put several of them in the ground over the years. He made another call. Tony, it's me. I need you to set up a safe house. Something secure. Off the grid. A woman's coming in, she doesn't know it yet, but she's in danger. I want round-the-clock security. Quiet, professional. She's not to know she's being guarded unless absolutely necessary. How long? Until I say otherwise. He hung up and sat back down. On his desk was a photo in a simple frame, his daughter, Sophia, smiling at her high school graduation 5 years ago. She lived in New York now, worked in publishing, called him twice a month. She didn't know the details of what he did, and he'd worked hard to keep it that way. But she'd once asked him, when she was 16, if he was a good man. He'd told her the truth. I try to be. I don't always succeed. Tonight, he'd succeed. The safe house was a small apartment above a dry cleaner in Koreatown. Clean, furnished, anonymous. Emma stood in the middle of the living room at 3 in the morning, holding a plastic bag with her toothbrush, a change of clothes from her car, and her phone charger. The man who'd driven her here, Tony, he'd said his name was, stood by the door. Mid-50s, quiet, with the same watchful eyes as Marco. You're safe here, Tony said. Food in the fridge, fresh sheets on the bed. Lock the door behind me. Don't answer it for anyone except Mr. DeLuca. When will? He'll be here tomorrow. Get some rest. Tony left. Emma locked the door, the deadbolt, and the chain. Then she walked to the window and looked out at the street below. Empty. Quiet. No gray hoodie. She sat on the couch and finally let herself shake. 3 weeks of fear, of looking over her shoulder, of sleeping with a kitchen knife under her pillow, it all came pouring out. She cried silently, the way she'd learned to cry when Derek had been in the next room, and noise meant consequences. At some point, she fell asleep on the couch. She woke to knocking. Sunlight streamed through the window. Emma's heart raced until she heard Marco's voice. Emma, it's DeLuca. Open up. She checked the peephole first, old habits, then unlocked the door. Marco looked different in daylight. Still dangerous, but somehow more human. He carried a bag from a bagel shop. You eat? He asked. Emma shook her head. Then eat. They sat at the small kitchen table. Marco had brought coffee, 2 real coffee, not the diner's burnt sludge. Emma bit into a bagel and realized she was starving. Tyler Brennan, Marco said after a moment. Former cop. He's been following you on someone's payroll. I need to know who and why. Emma set down her bagel. I think I know who. Derek Chambers. Her eyes widened. How? I have resources. Tell me about him. Emma wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, seeking its warmth. We met 4 years ago in Phoenix. I was waitressing. He was charming at first, attentive. Then we moved in together, and it changed. He wanted to know where I was all the time, who I talked to, what I wore. She paused. Then the hitting started. Marco's face remained neutral, but Emma saw his knuckles whiten around his cup. I tried to leave twice. Both times, he found me. The third time, a friend helped me get to a shelter. I filed a restraining order. He got arrested when he violated it. They gave him 6 months. She laughed bitterly. 6 months for 2 years of hell. And now he's out. I didn't know. I moved here, changed my phone number. I thought I was safe. Men like Chambers don't stop, Marco said quietly. They see it as a challenge, a game. Do you know where he is? My people are finding out. Marco leaned forward. Emma, I need you to understand something. I can make this problem go away. But there are consequences to that. Lines that get crossed. I need to know if you're okay with that. Emma met his eyes. What kind of consequences? The kind where Derek Chambers stops being a threat. Permanently. The air between them felt heavy. Emma understood what he was offering. What he was asking. I don't want you to kill him, she said slowly. I'm not that person. But I also can't live like this anymore. Looking over my shoulder. Afraid to go home. Afraid to exist. Marco nodded. Then we do it the legal way. I have friends in the police department. We'll build a case stalking. Violation of parole terms. Hiring someone for illegal surveillance. Chambers will go back to prison. For longer this time. And if that doesn't work, Marco's eyes went cold. Then we revisit the conversation. Emma should have been horrified, should have run. But instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, protected. Why are you helping me? She asked. Marco was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer. I had a sister once, Teresa. Beautiful, smart, full of life. She married young, to a man who seemed perfect. He wasn't. By the time we realized what was happening, it was too late. He put her in the hospital 3 times. The 4th time, she didn't leave. Emma's breath caught. I was 23 when she died, Marco continued. Building my way up in my father's organization. I had power, resources, connections. But I didn't use them soon enough. I told myself it was her choice, her life, that I couldn't interfere. I was wrong. I'm sorry, Emma whispered. Don't be sorry. Just promise me something. When this is over, you'll build a life worth protecting. You'll stop running and start living. Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. Marco stood. I have to go. There's a phone on the counter burner, clean. Only 3 numbers programmed. Mine, Tony's, and Detective Moreno. You need anything, you call. You hear anything suspicious, you call. You get scared, you call. Understood? Understood. He walked to the door, then paused. Emma? The meatloaf really wasn't that bad. She laughed through her tears. Liar. He almost smiled. Then he was gone. Tyler Brennan sat in a warehouse in Commerce, zip-tied to a chair. His nose was bleeding not from being hit, but from Vincent Russo's very thorough explanation of what would happen if he didn't cooperate. Marco walked in at noon, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled up. Mr. Brennan, he said pleasantly, we need to talk. I want a lawyer. You're not under arrest. This is just a conversation between professionals. Marco pulled up a chair and sat down, casual, like they were discussing the weather. Derek Chambers hired you to follow Emma Hartley. Why? I don't know any. Vincent moved. Marco held up a hand. Let me rephrase, Marco said. You can tell me now, and walk out of here with a bruised ego and a new appreciation for honesty. Or you can waste my time, and Vincent gets creative. I'm a busy man, Mr. Brennan. Choose quickly. Brennan's jaw tightened. He paid me 10 grand, said she was his ex. That he just wanted to know where she was living, where she worked. Nothing illegal. And you believed him? I didn't care. 10 grand is 10 grand. Marco leaned forward. Do you know what happens to men who hurt women in prison, Mr. Brennan? Former cops especially. They have a very difficult time. I didn't hurt anyone. I just watched. You enabled violence. In my book, that's the same thing. Marco stood up. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Chambers. You're going to tell him that Emma left town, quit her job, moved to Seattle. You're going to give him a fake address up there, and then you're going to disappear for a while. Mexico's nice this time of year. And if I don't? Marco's smile was cold. Then Detective Moreno gets an anonymous tip about a former cop who's been stalking women for hire. Your phone records get subpoenaed, your bank accounts get audited, and I personally make sure every district attorney in California knows your name. Brennan went pale. Oh, and one more thing, Marco added. If anything happens to Emma Hartley, anything at all, I will hold you personally responsible. And I won't be calling Detective Moreno. I'll be calling Vincent. Are we clear? Crystal. Good. Marco nodded to Vincent, who cut the zip ties. Make the call. Now. Brennan pulled out his phone with shaking hands and dialed. Marco listened as he fed Chambers the lie about Seattle, a new address, a new job. Chambers bought it. He actually thanked Brennan and promised a bonus. When the call ended, Marco took Brennan's phone and crushed it under his heel. Get out of my city, he said quietly. Brennan ran. Vincent closed the warehouse door. That was easier than expected. Because Brennan's a coward. Chambers is different. He won't give up this easily. So what's the play? Marco pulled out his own phone and called Detective Moreno. Rachel, it's time. I'm sending you an address. Derek Chambers, parole violation. I have a witness willing to testify that he hired someone to stalk his ex-girlfriend. I'm also sending you phone records, financial transactions, and a recording of said witness making his statement. You recorded him? I'm thorough. Marco, if this goes to trial, it won't. Chambers is going to violate his parole long before that. Men like him can't help themselves. Just have someone watching when he does. He hung up and turned to Vincent. I want eyes on Chambers 24/7. The moment he steps out of line, threatens someone, carries a weapon, misses a check-in, I want it documented. And the girl? She stays protected until Chambers is back in custody. Vincent nodded. Boss, can I ask something? Why her? We've had plenty of situations like this before. You usually just handle it and move on. Marco was quiet for a moment. Because I should have saved Teresa, and I didn't. I can save Emma. And maybe that balances the scales a little. Scales don't balance in our world. No, Marco agreed. But that doesn't mean we stop trying. Emma spent 3 days in the safe house. Marco came by each evening, bringing food and updates. Derek had bought the Seattle story. The police were building a case. Everything was moving forward. On the 4th day, Emma's phone rang. The burner. She didn't recognize the number. Hello? Emma. Derek's voice. Smooth, familiar, terrifying. Did you really think you could hide from me? Her blood went ice cold. How did you get this number? I always find you, baby. You know that. Seattle was a cute try, though. Too bad I checked the airlines. No Emma Hartley flew anywhere in the last 3 weeks. Emma's hand shook so hard she almost dropped the phone. Where are you? Derek asked, his voice turning hard. Tell me now, and I'll forgive you for running. We can start over, like old times. Derek, please. Tell me, or I start visiting everyone you know. Your friend Rosie from the diner? That old lady, Mrs. Chen? Maybe I'll start with them. Emma hung up and immediately called Marco. He answered on the first ring. What happened? She told him, words tumbling out in a rush. Marco listened in silence. Stay where you are, he said when she finished. Lock the door. I'm sending Tony over. And Emma? Chambers just made his last mistake. 20 minutes later, Tony arrived with another man. They positioned themselves outside the apartment door and by the fire escape. Emma sat on the couch, knees pulled to her chest, that old familiar terror creeping back in. Her phone rang again. Derek. This time, she didn't answer. It rang 4 more times over the next hour. Then the voicemail started coming. You can't hide forever. I'm going to find you. When I do, you'll wish you'd never left. Emma listened to each one, and with each message, something inside her hardened. She'd run from Phoenix. She'd built a new life. She'd been so careful. And still, Derek had found her. She was tired of running. When Marco called at 8 that evening, Emma's voice was steady. I want this to end, whatever it takes. Emma, I mean it. I can't live like this. If your way is the only way, then that's what we do. There was a long silence. Are you sure? Because there's no going back from that decision. Emma thought of Teresa, Marco's sister. Of all the women who died because someone decided to wait, to be patient, to let the law handle it. She thought of the restraining order that had been worthless. the 6-month sentence that had solved nothing. "I'm sure," she said. "Then we do it my way," Marco said. "But Emma? I'm not killing him. I'm going to do something better. I'm going to make him disappear." Derek Chambers sat in his studio apartment in Van Nuys, staring at his phone. Emma hadn't answered his last 10 calls. That wasn't like her. When he used that tone, the one that meant consequences, she always answered. Something had changed. His burner phone rang. "Brennan." "What?" Derek snapped. "We have a problem. Someone knows. About Emma. About me watching her." Derek's grip tightened on the phone. "Who?" "I don't know his name, but he's connected. Organized crime, probably. He had people grab me, threaten me. I told him Emma went to Seattle." "You idiot. She's not in Seattle. I know that now. Look, I'm out. I gave you information, but I'm done. Find someone else." Brennan hung up. Derek threw his phone across the room. Then he grabbed his jacket and his car keys. If he couldn't get to Emma directly, he'd go to the places she knew. Rosie's diner. The laundromat where she washed clothes. The grocery store on 7th. He'd find her. What Derek didn't know was that Vincent Russo was already in the parking lot, watching. And when Derek got into his car, 2 other vehicles fell in behind him, keeping their distance. Derek drove to Rosie's diner first. Through the window, he saw a different waitress working. He circled the block twice, then drove to Emma's old apartment building. The windows were dark. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Looking for someone?" Derek stared at the screen. Another text. "Don't bother. She's somewhere you'll never find her." His face flushed with rage. He typed back, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. "Someone who's tired of men like you. Parking lot behind Geneviese's restaurant. 1 hour. Come alone, and we'll talk about Emma." Derek knew it was a trap. He wasn't stupid. But rage had replaced reason. Whoever this was had Emma. Had taken what belonged to him. He'd make them pay. He drove to Geneviese's with a pistol tucked into his waistband, a violation of his parole. But he was past caring. The parking lot was empty except for one black sedan. Derek parked at the far end and waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Then Marco stepped out of the shadows, hands visible, empty. "Derek Chambers," Marco said. "We need to talk." Derek got out of his car, hand near his weapon. "Where's Emma?" "Safe. Far from you. She's mine. She's a human being, not property." Marco took a step closer. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave Los Angeles. Tonight. You're going to get in your car and drive until you hit another state. And you're going to forget Emma Hartley exists." Derek laughed. "Or what? You'll kill me? I'm not scared of you." "I'm not going to kill you," Marco said calmly. "I'm going to do something worse. See? You're currently violating your parole in 3 different ways. You left your supervised area, you're carrying a concealed weapon, and you hired someone to stalk a woman you have a restraining order against." Derek's hand moved toward his gun. "I wouldn't," Marco said. "Detective Moreno is watching from that window. And there are 3 cameras recording this conversation." Derek looked up. Sure enough, a figure stood in the 2nd-story window of the restaurant. "You have 2 choices," Marco continued. "You get in your car and disappear. Or Moreno comes down here, finds the gun, and you go back to prison. This time for 5 to 10 years. In a facility with no protective custody. Where everyone will know you're an ex-convict who beats women." Derek's face went white. "You can't." "I can. I have. The only question is what you choose." For a long moment, Derek stood frozen. Then, slowly, he reached for his gun, not to draw it, but to drop it on the ground. "Smart choice," Marco said. "Now drive. And Derek? If I ever hear your name again in connection with Emma Hartley, there won't be cameras. There won't be choices. There will just be Vincent and a hole in the desert. Are we clear?" Derek nodded, got in his car, and drove away. Marco watched the taillights disappear. Then he looked up at the window. Detective Moreno gave a thumbs up. They'd captured everything. Derek's admission, the gun, the threat. If Derek ever came back, they had enough to put him away for a long time. Marco pulled out his phone and called Emma. "It's done. He's gone." He heard her exhale on the other end. "For how long?" "Long enough for you to build a life. And if he comes back, we'll be ready." "Thank you," Emma whispered. "Don't thank me yet. You still have work to do." "What work?" "Living. Really living. Not just surviving. A week passed. Then 2. Emma stayed in the safe house, though Tony assured her the threat was gone. Derek had been tracked to Las Vegas, then Phoenix. Then he'd disappeared entirely. Detective Moreno had issued a warrant for his arrest for parole violation. If he surfaced anywhere, he'd be picked up. But Emma couldn't seem to leave the apartment. Marco came by on a Saturday afternoon. He didn't knock, just used a key Tony had given him. Emma was sitting by the window, staring out at nothing. "You planning to live in here forever?" Marco asked. She turned. "It's safe here." "It's a cage." He sat down across from her. "Emma, he's gone. You won." "Did I?" "Because I still feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop." Marco was quiet for a moment. Then he rolled up his left sleeve. A long scar ran from his wrist to his elbow. "Knife fight when I was 24, he said. "Guy I'd put in the hospital came back for revenge. Nearly bled out before my people got me to a hospital." He rolled the sleeve back down. "For 2 years after that, I jumped every time I heard footsteps behind me. Slept with a gun under my pillow. Couldn't walk down a dark street without checking every shadow. What changed? I realized the guy who attacked me was dead, and I was letting a dead man control my life. So I decided to take it back." Emma looked at her hands. "I don't know how. One step at a time. Today, you leave this apartment. Walk to the corner and back. Tomorrow, you go further. Next week, you go back to work if you want. Or you find a new job somewhere else. But you start moving forward. What if I can't?" Marco leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "Then you dishonor every woman who didn't make it out. Teresa didn't get a second chance. You did. Don't waste it." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I'm scared." "Good. Scared means you're alive. Scared means you care. But don't let it paralyze you." They sat in silence for a while. Then Emma stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. "One step at a time," she said quietly. Marco nodded. One step at a time. Over the next month, Emma rebuilt her life piece by piece. She went back to Rosie's diner not to work, but to have coffee with Bobby and the owner. She enrolled in a community college course in business management. She found a small studio apartment in a better neighborhood and signed a lease. Marco checked in occasionally, but less frequently. He'd never intended to be a permanent fixture in her life, just a bridge from danger to safety. But Emma found herself missing their conversations. The way he listened without judgment. The way he seemed to understand the weight of trauma without trying to fix her. One evening, she called his number. "Emma," he answered. "Everything all right?" "Yes. I just wanted to say thank you. For everything. You saved my life. You saved your own life. I just provided a little insurance." "Marco, what you said about your sister, about not saving her in time, that wasn't your fault." There was a long silence. "I know. But knowing and feeling are different things." "Yeah," Emma said softly. "They are." She paused. "Will I see you again?" "Probably not. You're building a new life. I'm part of the old one. You're part of the reason I have a new life." "Then that's enough." His voice softened. "Take care of yourself, Emma." He hung up before she could respond. Emma stared at her phone, feeling an unexpected sense of loss. Then she set it down and looked around her new apartment. Plants in the window, books on the shelf, a life taking shape. Marco was right. It was enough. 3 months later, Marco sat in his office at Genovese's, reviewing quarterly reports. The restaurant was doing well. So was the import business, the nightclub, all the legitimate fronts that kept money flowing and authorities looking elsewhere. Vincent knocked and entered. "Boss, we have a problem." Marco looked up. "What kind?" "Derek Chambers. He's back." Marco's jaw tightened. "Where?" "Phoenix. But he's been asking questions about Los Angeles. About Emma. Seems he's got a job, trying to fly under the radar. But he's been making calls." "To who?" "Private investigators, bounty hunters, people who find people." Marco stood. "Has he located her?" "Not yet. But it's only a matter of time." Marco walked to the window. Los Angeles sprawled below, millions of lives intersecting. One of those lives was Emma Hartley, who'd just started at a new job, who'd laughed for the first time in years at a coworker's joke, who was learning to live without fear. He wasn't going to let Derek Chambers take that away. "Call Marino," Marco said. "Tell her we have confirmation Chambers is violating parole. Give her his location. That'll put him away for a while. but not forever. I know. Marco turned. Which is why we need to make sure he understands the consequences of coming back permanently. Vincent raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? A conversation. One that makes it very clear that Emma Hartley is off limits. Not just now. Forever. 2 days later, Marco flew to Phoenix. He didn't bring Vincent. Didn't bring Muscle. This needed to be personal. He found Derek at a construction site, working under a false name. Derek saw him coming and his face went pale. I told you to forget her name, Marco said quietly. I'm not bothering anyone. I'm just living my life. You're making inquiries. Asking questions. That's bothering someone. Derek's hands clenched into fists. I just want to know she's okay. No, you want to know where she is. There's a difference. Marco stepped closer. Here's what you don't understand. Emma Hartley isn't just some woman I helped. She's under my protection. Permanently. That means if you so much as think about her, I'll know. If you hire someone to find her, I'll know. If you get within 100 miles of Los Angeles, I'll know. You can't watch me forever. I don't have to. Detective Moreno will be here tomorrow to arrest you for parole violation. You'll do another year, maybe 2. When you get out, this conversation is still valid. And if you violate it, the next person you meet won't be a detective. It'll be someone much less pleasant. Derek's face flushed with rage, but underneath it was fear. You think you're protecting her? You're just another controlling man telling her what to do. The difference is I asked her permission. I gave her choices. And when she was ready to move on with her life, I let her go. You never would have done any of that. Marco turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. I looked into your background. Your father was a violent drunk. Your mother left when you were 8. You learned that love and control were the same thing. I almost feel sorry for you. Almost. But pity doesn't change what you've done. It doesn't erase the scars on Emma's arms. So I'm giving you one last chance to be better than your father was. Take it. He walked away. The next day, Derek Chambers was arrested. 3 weeks later, he was sentenced to 3 years for parole violation and additional charges of stalking. By the time he got out, Emma would be so far into her new life that she'd be impossible to find. Marco made sure of it. 18 months after that night in the diner, Emma stood behind the counter of her own cafe. It was small, just 10 tables, an espresso machine, and a chalkboard menu, but it was hers. She'd used money she'd saved, a small business loan, and sheer determination to make it happen. The cafe was in Silver Lake, far from the old diner on 6th Street. She'd named it Second Chances, and the regular customers loved the coffee, the atmosphere, and the owner who remembered everyone's order. Emma had cut her hair shorter, dressed differently. She smiled more. The woman who'd whispered "help me" in that corner booth felt like a different person entirely. But she thought about Marco sometimes, wondered where he was, if he was safe, if he ever thought about her. On a Tuesday morning in March, the bell above the door chimed. Emma looked up from steaming milk and her breath caught. Marco walked in. He wore jeans and a simple sweater, no suit, no expensive watch. He looked almost normal. Almost. Is this seat taken? He asked, nodding to a table by the window. Emma's heart hammered. No, it's yours. She made him a cappuccino not because he ordered one, but because she remembered he took his coffee with just a bit of foam. She brought it over and sat down across from him. Nice place, Marco said, looking around. Thank you. I opened 6 months ago. I know. I've been keeping tabs, making sure you were safe. And am I? Derek Chambers is in prison. He'll be there for a while. When he gets out, he'll be on such a tight leash that even thinking about you will violate his parole. Marco took a sip of coffee. You did this on your own. Built something real. I'm proud of you. Emma felt tears sting her eyes. Why are you here? Marco was quiet for a moment. Because I've been thinking about what you said. About my sister. About blame and responsibility. He met her eyes. I've spent 20 years building an empire on control and fear. Making sure nothing bad happens by being the biggest, scariest thing in the room. But the night you asked me for help, I wasn't scary. I was just someone who could protect another person. And it reminded me why I started doing this in the first place. What do you mean? I'm stepping back. From the business. From the life. I have people who can run things. I've spent 2 decades being Marco DeLuca, the name people whisper. I want to find out who Marco is when nobody's afraid of him. Emma reached across the table and took his hand. His knuckles were still scarred, but his grip was gentle. "Who is he?" she asked softly. "I don't know yet, but I'd like to find out. Maybe with some help." "What kind of help?" Marco smiled a real smile, not the cold one she'd seen that first night. "The kind where I come to this cafe every Tuesday morning, where we drink coffee and talk about normal things. Where I'm not a boss and you're not someone who needs saving. Just two people figuring out how to live." Emma smiled back. "I think I can help with that. There's one condition." "What's that?" "I pay for my own coffee. No discounts for former Mafia bosses." Emma laughed. "Former?" "Working on it." They sat there as morning light streamed through the window, washing away the shadows of the past. Outside, Los Angeles hummed with its usual chaos sirens and traffic and the endless movement of people trying to survive. But inside Second Chance's cafe, two people who'd found each other in the darkest moment of one's life sat quietly, drinking coffee, and discovering that protection could become partnership. That fear could become trust. That sometimes the most dangerous man in the city could also be the safest person in your world. Emma squeezed Marco's hand. "I knew you'd come back." "How?" "Because you're not the man everyone thinks you are. You're better." Marco looked down at their joined hands. "I'm trying to be. That's all any of us can do." The bell above the door chimed as another customer entered. Emma stood to take their order, but before she left, she looked back at Marco. "Same time next week?" she asked. "Every week," he promised. And for the first time in a very long time, both of them believed in tomorrow.